Your soulmate has finally decided to reveal their shocking secret. They are responsible for the death of my beloved child. There is a reason your heart has felt heavier than usual, as though an invisible truth has been searching for the right moment to find you. Tonight, that moment has finally arrived. Your soulmate has made a decision they once believed they could never make. They are ready to confess a secret so devastating that even speaking the first few words makes their hands tremble. They keep whispering, "I'm responsible for the death of before stopping in complete silence, unable to finish the sentence. But the part they cannot say is also the part that changes everything. Because what they have believed for years, and what actually happened, are not the same story. Don't skip. One missing detail has remained hidden for far too long, and it is about to rewrite everything you thought you knew. Just a few hours ago, your soulmate uncovered something they were never supposed to see again. Tucked away behind forgotten memories was an old note, stained with time but still carrying the truth they had spent years trying to escape. The moment they opened it, every painful memory came rushing back. They remembered the desperate warning they almost gave, the conversation they delayed, and the terrible night when someone precious to you never came home. Since then, they have carried the crushing belief that one different decision could have changed the outcome forever. Yet buried within that forgotten note was a single sentence that refused to match the story they had blamed themselves for. Stay till the end, because someone else may have known far more than anyone was willing to admit. Now your soulmate stands at the edge of the hardest conversation of their life. They know this confession could shatter your trust forever, yet keeping it hidden has become an even greater punishment. Every step toward you feels heavier than the last because they are no longer afraid of losing your forgiveness, they are afraid that the real truth has been hidden so well that you may never believe it. And just as they gather the courage to speak, one unexpected name appears in the evidence they found, a name that should never have been connected to that tragic night. In that instant, the confession changes completely, and the secret is no longer about who carries the guilt, but about who has been protecting the real story all along. The closer your soulmate comes to telling you everything, the more they realize this secret was never theirs to carry alone. For years, they believed they had failed someone you loved beyond repair. They replayed that night over and over, convinced a single choice had stolen a future that could never be restored. But as they carefully unfolded the forgotten note once again, another detail caught their attention, one they had somehow overlooked every previous time. A time was written in the corner. It didn't match the official timeline everyone had accepted. Suddenly, the story they had punished themselves with began to crack, and a frightening question emerged. If that timeline was false, then who created it, and what were they trying so desperately to hide? A chilling memory returned without warning. Your soulmate remembered seeing someone leave the scene long before anyone else claimed to have arrived. At the time, fear convinced them to stay silent. They thought no one would believe them, especially after tragedy had already consumed everyone involved. So they buried the memory deep inside their heart and accepted the blame instead. But silence has a way of protecting the wrong people. Every year that passed made the truth harder to speak, until guilt became their identity. Stay with this story, because the face they remembered that night is about to connect with a name you would never expect. Now the confession is taking a direction even your soulmate never imagined. They are no longer preparing to tell you that they caused the tragedy. They are preparing to tell you why they allowed themselves to be seen as responsible while the real chain of events remained hidden in plain sight. Someone manipulated the evidence. Someone quietly guided every conversation away from the truth. And just before your soulmate finally says that person's name aloud, they discover one final piece of proof that changes everything once again, because it reveals that the person they have been protecting all these years may have been watching them from the shadows the entire time. Just when your soulmate believed they had uncovered the final truth, another impossible discovery stopped them cold. The name they were preparing to reveal was crossed out in faded ink, replaced by a different handwriting that looked strangely familiar. Their heart began racing because this was no ordinary correction. Someone had intentionally rewritten the story before anyone else could see it. In that moment, they realized the secret they had carried for years had been carefully shaped by another person's lies. The guilt that haunted them suddenly felt different, not gone, but no longer complete. If someone altered the evidence once, how many other pieces of that tragic night had been changed as well? The deeper they searched, the more disturbing everything became. An old voicemail, ignored for years, contained a voice speaking in panic only minutes before the tragedy unfolded. It wasn't asking for help. It was warning someone to stay away. Your soulmate froze as they recognized the voice immediately, because it belonged to the one person everyone believed had nothing to do with that night. Every memory they had trusted started falling apart. The silence they blamed themselves for was hiding something much darker than regret. Don't look away now. The next truth doesn't just explain the past, it changes the reason your soulmate has stayed close to you all this time. Now there is no turning back. Your soulmate knows they cannot protect the real story any longer, even if revealing it destroys every relationship left standing. They are ready to place every hidden letter, every forgotten recording, and every painful memory into your hands. But before they can speak the one name that has remained buried for years, they notice something that sends a chill through their entire body. The evidence they thought had been hidden forever is no longer where they left it. Someone found it first. And that can only mean one terrifying thing. The person who buried the truth knows your soulmate is finally ready to expose everything. Before your soulmate could even process what had happened, they noticed something that made every fear feel real. The folder containing the missing evidence hadn't simply disappeared, it had been searched. The pages were out of order, fingerprints covered the edges, and one photograph was gone. Not the entire file. Just a single picture. Whoever took it knew exactly what they were looking for. Your soulmate's hands began to shake because that photograph was the only piece proving someone else had been present before the tragedy unfolded. If another person now possessed it, then the truth was no longer hidden, it was being hunted. An unsettling realization followed almost immediately. The strange phone calls, the unfamiliar faces that seemed to appear and disappear, the feeling that someone was always watching from a distance. None of it had been coincidence. For years, your soulmate believed those moments were born from guilt and imagination. Now they understood they had been quietly monitored by someone desperate to keep the past buried forever. Every step they took toward the truth seemed to trigger another warning. Yet instead of retreating, they made a decision they had never been brave enough to make before. They would bring every unanswered question directly to you, because only together could the missing pieces finally make sense. Stay till the end. The next discovery is more shocking than the confession itself. As your soulmate prepared to meet you, one final envelope slipped from inside the damaged folder. Across the front, only a few words were written in fading ink: "Open this only when you're ready to learn who really caused that night." Their heart nearly stopped. They had searched for answers for years, but they had never seen this envelope before. It hadn't been hidden from everyone, it had been hidden specifically from them. With trembling hands, they slowly reached for the seal, unaware that what waited inside would completely overturn the story they had believed since the very beginning. The moment your soulmate broke the seal, they expected to find a confession. Instead, they found a single page covered with names, times, and handwritten notes that contradicted every official version of that tragic night. One sentence stood out above all the others: "The first story they tell you is the one they need you to believe." Your soulmate read it again and again, barely able to breathe. If that sentence was true, then the guilt they had carried for years had been built on a carefully constructed lie. But one question refused to leave their mind. Who wrote this, and why had they waited so long for it to be discovered? As they turned the page over, a small photograph slipped onto the floor. It showed someone standing in the background only moments before everything changed. The face was partially hidden, yet one unmistakable detail caught your soulmate's attention: a ring they had seen before, worn by someone who had always claimed they were nowhere near the scene. Suddenly, forgotten conversations, strange excuses, and impossible timelines began fitting together like pieces of a puzzle. Your soulmate realized they hadn't been protecting a guilty secret all these years. They had unknowingly been protecting the person who created it. Don't skip. The next choice they make could expose the truth, or bury it forever. Without wasting another second, your soulmate gathered every letter, every photograph, and every forgotten memory into one place. There would be no more silence. No more fear. They were finally ready to place everything in your hands, no matter what happened afterward. But just as they reached for the door, their phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. There were only 7 chilling words on the screen: "You were never supposed to find that envelope." In that instant, your soulmate realized the real story wasn't over, because the person hiding the truth had just made the first move. That message changed everything in an instant. Your soulmate didn't panic because of the threat itself, they panicked because it proved one terrifying fact. Someone knew exactly what had been discovered, even though no one should have known the envelope existed. They looked around the room, searching for any sign that they weren't alone. Then another realization struck them like lightning. The message wasn't trying to scare them away. It was warning them that every step they took from this moment forward was being watched. If that was true, then the person hiding the truth had been closer than anyone had ever imagined. Stay with this story, because the next clue doesn't come from the past, it comes from someone who is still hiding in plain sight. Determined not to lose another chance, your soulmate rushed back through every forgotten memory, refusing to ignore even the smallest detail. One conversation suddenly returned with perfect clarity. Years ago, someone had insisted that the tragedy was just a terrible accident, before the authorities had even announced what had actually happened. At the time, those words meant nothing. Now they meant everything. How could anyone describe the event so confidently before the facts were even known? That single sentence exposed a crack in the entire story. The more your soulmate thought about it, the more impossible it became to dismiss. Someone had spoken too soon, because someone already knew the truth. With their heart pounding harder than ever, your soulmate gathered the evidence and made one final decision. There would be no more waiting, no more second-guessing, and no more carrying this burden alone. They were coming to you, ready to reveal every hidden letter, every missing photograph, and every unanswered question. But before they could leave, an old voice recording began playing by itself from a forgotten device lying on the table. The recording lasted only a few seconds, yet one sentence froze them where they stood. If you're hearing this, the wrong person has carried the blame for far too long. In that moment, your soulmate realized the real confession was only just beginning. The voice recording ended, but the silence that followed was even more unsettling. Your soulmate replayed those final words again and again, hoping they had misunderstood them. They hadn't. Someone had known from the very beginning that the blame was placed on the wrong person, yet they chose to stay silent while another soul carried years of unbearable guilt. Every heartbeat now felt like a countdown. Whoever recorded that message wasn't guessing, they had witnessed something no one else was supposed to see. Don't skip. The next discovery will reveal why that recording was hidden until now. Unable to ignore the truth any longer, your soulmate searched the forgotten device for anything else it might contain. Most of the files had been erased, but one damaged recording remained. The audio was broken, filled with static, yet a single conversation could still be heard. One frightened voice whispered, "If they ever find out who was really there, everything will fall apart." Then another voice answered with chilling calmness, "They never will, because they'll spend the rest of their lives blaming themselves." Those words struck your soulmate harder than anything they had ever heard. In that instant, they understood their guilt had become someone else's perfect disguise. Stay till the end, because the identity of that second voice is closer to you than anyone could have imagined. With trembling hands, your soulmate gathered every letter, every photograph, and every recording into one final collection. They refused to let another day pass without telling you the entire truth. But just as they reached the place where they planned to meet you, they noticed something impossible. Someone had arrived before them. Resting on the seat where you were supposed to be waiting was a sealed envelope with your name written across the front. Beneath it was a single handwritten sentence that made their blood run cold. "Before they tell you their version, read mine first." The sight of that envelope stopped your soulmate in their tracks. They hadn't told anyone where this meeting would take place, yet someone had reached it first. That could only mean one thing: whoever had been hiding the truth was no longer waiting in the shadows. They were making the first move. With cautious hands, your soulmate lifted the envelope and noticed something unusual. The seal was old, but the paper itself was new, as if someone had copied a message written long ago. Every instinct told them not to open it. Yet walking away was no longer an option. Something huge is waiting for you, because the words inside were never meant to survive until today. As the letter unfolded, the first line sent a chill through their entire body. "You have blamed yourself long enough." The handwriting matched the faded notes from the missing file, leaving no doubt they had come from the same mysterious person. But the next sentence was even more disturbing. It claimed that the tragedy everyone remembered had been carefully staged to protect a secret far greater than a single life. Your soulmate's breathing grew heavier with every line. They realized the death that had haunted them for years was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Someone had manipulated witnesses, hidden evidence, and rewritten memories so perfectly that even those closest to the truth had accepted the lie without question. Just as your soulmate reached the final page, a small object slipped from the envelope onto the ground. It wasn't another photograph or another letter. It was an old key attached to a faded tag with one handwritten location. They recognized it immediately, because it pointed to the last place anyone searched before giving up on the truth forever. In that instant, they knew the real answers had never been destroyed, they had simply been locked away. And somewhere behind that forgotten door waited the one piece of evidence capable of exposing the person who had controlled this story from the very beginning. The old key felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried the weight of every unanswered question from that terrible night. Your soulmate stared at the faded tag, unable to shake the feeling that someone had expected this exact moment to happen. The location written on it had been abandoned for years, forgotten by almost everyone who once knew it existed. Yet the more they thought about it, the more one memory refused to stay buried. They had been there once before. Only hours after the tragedy. At the time, nothing seemed unusual. Now they were certain they had overlooked the one detail that mattered most. Don't look away. The truth waiting behind that locked door is nothing like the story you've been told. Without wasting another second, your soulmate made their way to the deserted building. Dust covered every surface, and the silence inside was almost unbearable. When the old key finally turned in the rusted lock, a hidden room slowly opened before them. It wasn't filled with forgotten furniture or broken boxes. It was filled with carefully labeled files, photographs, and recordings arranged as though someone had been preserving the past instead of hiding it. Then they noticed one box sitting alone in the center of the room. Across the lid were 6 chilling words, "Open only when the lies begin." Their hands trembled as they lifted the cover, revealing documents that proved the official investigation had ignored evidence from the very first day. Stay till the end, because one photograph inside that box changes everything. As your soulmate reached for the photograph, their entire world seemed to stop. Standing clearly in the background was the same mysterious figure who had appeared in every hidden clue, but this time, their face was completely visible. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone whose name had never once appeared in the investigation, someone trusted by everyone involved, someone with the power to guide every version of the story without raising suspicion. Your soulmate realized the confession they had planned to give you was no longer about their guilt. It had become a race against time, because the person in that photograph had just discovered the hidden room had finally been opened.